All right, so we are back at the Cracks in Postmodernity. Today we have Jacob Savage, who has written two very big hit pieces for Compact Magazine. The first one about white male novelists, or the lack thereof, and second one about more focusing on DEI policy and how it impacts, I guess, hiring, lack of hiring of white men. It's gotten a lot of reactions, all different reactions on the internet. But I wanted us to be able to talk to Jacob himself. So, Jacob, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for picking me off of the slush pile.
Of course, of course. Yeah, I remember the day that we got your email in the inbox, and little did I know what would become of it. And here we are. But yeah, I mean, for people who don't know, before we get into the articles themselves, tell us about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your own background.
Um, I grew up in New York. I went to a private Jewish school, and I went to Princeton. I sort of thought I took some creative writing classes. I thought sort of a novel would come to me, but none did. I realized I did a little journalism in my early 20s and moved out to LA to be a screenwriter. And spent, 10 plus years writing scripts with varying levels of non-success, while slowly consolidating my control over the indie ticket business. Um, and now, then at a certain point, I sort of got fed up and wrote some stuff. I have a wife and a couple kids, live in the suburbs. I'm just a guy.
Just a guy, many such cases. But what was it like that initially got you writing? Like what made you catch the writing bug, as they say?
Like back way back when, like
Yeah, early on.
no, I just it was something that I always like was gravitated to and found interesting and thought that I was good at. It's sort of like it's hard to tell whether you get into things because you're good at them or you're good at them because you get in, like for
Mhm.
instance, I was always pretty good at baseball, which I loved when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and I was pretty bad at soccer, which I hated. And who knows what sort of came first, I guess. But I think, in the end, it's just because I read a lot of books when I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I fell into writing by accident because, I mean, like in, I don't know, elementary school, even in high school, like I sucked at writing. Like I failed lots of like reading comprehension tests. I was in like remedial English in undergrad. And I think it's because like I always had the artistic impulse, but whenever my parents would sign me up to like actually learn some kind of art, I'd be like, no, I need to spend my free time at home watching SpongeBob. That's.
That's we're having that issue with our 4-year-old kid who like loves music and
Yeah.
he loves like playing the piano, but anytime you try to like teach him what the notes are on the keyboard, he like shuts down and demands to watch a Disney movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and ultimately, I think watching SpongeBob like definitely formed my artistic, writerly sensibility. But yeah, then at a certain point, I was like, okay, like I have a creative drive, but I don't know any skills. So I guess I'll just write. And that's how I ended up here. But
Yeah, in retrospect, it would have been cool if it was just like woodworking that had been the thing.
yeah, it's like an actual practical skill. But anyway, so okay, you wrote this article, you submitted it to Compact. What made you decide to do it? Like, why did you decide to write the article? The first one.
The first one, well, there were really two articles. I had the idea for the first one. I had a reunion with a bunch of guys who were in my class at Princeton who were not fuck ups in the way that I was sort of always a little bit of a fuck up. And none of them were anywhere good. I mean, there's like 1 out of 10 of them was like a corporate lawyer, but the rest of them, in previous generations would have been sort of like minor captains of industry or, ad executives or, all sorts of things. Like they were all just not. In varying degrees, some were sort of semi-unemployed, some were married to like women who had, really good jobs. But basically just these were the people who I think, in any earlier iteration of things, would have sort of been crushing it. And for none of them to be, was sort of eye-opening because it wasn't just sort of me in the bubble of Hollywood. So I started writing that. I started pitching that. I pitched that around, got a few rejections. Out of that actually came the idea for the sort of white male literary piece.
Mm.
And then I wrote that, and Matthew asked if I wanted to write the bigger article, and I was sort of hesitant, but then I did. Um, and that was that.
And you, I mean, you hint at it a little bit in the first article, but like, what was your experience as like a white millennial dude in writing world?
I mean, it sucked. I mean, there was no way around. Like, I was at a party a couple weeks ago, and there were a couple writers who sort of had, managed to sell a couple scripts recently, but they were like, it was so great to just have that like in writing about what had happened. No, you just were told very, very directly that, TV is out of the question. Maybe, you write like something that gets on the blacklist, you can get something that will lead to something. Um, and it just became very, very hard. It was really sort of like you were aiming for a bullseye and you had to hit it. And even if you hit it, it wasn't clear that anything would happen. I mean, I remember specifically my wife, who's a costume designer. I was at a party with her, must have been like a rap party in 2016 or 2017. By this point, I'd been in LA for 5 years. I'd written a couple pretty good things. Like, that was after the story that I told in the article. And I'm and she's like, there are a couple of writers, and they basically had gotten their jobs because they had been the ones who canceled Louis C.K. And I was like, um, and that was the only time I think I ever got like, I weirdly like choked up and got like so like mad and upset. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
like yell it. It was just personal, but that it was like that sort of everywhere, for 6, 7, 8 years. Like,
Hmm.
um, and it just ended, I don't, in retrospect, I said this in the article, it's like, why did I keep trying it? I'm honestly more annoyed at myself at this point than I am at the like shitty system.
Yeah. But I mean, so like when you look at the immediate reactions to the piece, especially on X, I mean, a lot of people are like, okay, here's a white guy whining about how unfair it is that, now he doesn't have, white people don't have opportunities they used to have after having been in power for so long. This is just your payback, the pendulum swinging the other way. Get over it. How did you feel when you saw those kinds of responses?
I mean, I think there's something more. I at least I think it broke through, except for like the blue sky people who are still like it didn't happen. I respect someone who's like it happened, like I don't care, much more than someone who sort of insists that I still have some sort of magical privilege over everyone else in the world. Um, no, I mean, I think that I just think the idea that you can, that because Martin Scorsese or Larry David are making like movies or TV, that somehow that makes my life like richer and like is bizarre.
Mm,
And um you know like I don't at this point it doesn't bother me. It's sort of like what, if people can be honest about what happened, then we can. I think part of the issue was for 10 years is that no one was honest about what was going on. If they had said to everyone in 2015, like, or 2014, this is what we're going to do for 10 years if you're like a white man in the following industries, um then you know you will take 5% of you, the rest of you can get out. I think a lot of us would have moved on. You could fight that politically, you could do a lot of things that
mm,
make, sense, but there would have been some way to pivot for a lot of people, and there wasn't. And I think that that was the most poisonous thing about it.
Yeah, because I mean, I have to admit, when I first saw your draft, I was like, okay, not another white guy complaining about, reverse racism and how it's unfair, blah, blah, blah. Because I mean, honestly, like, as much as I'm, far from woke, I'm just like, I just find it kind of grating when you have, like, again, reactionary anti-woke people being like, oh, well, this is an injustice that they're discriminating against white men. I'm like, okay, like, sure, that's not fair, but again, the pendulum swinging the other way, whatever. But when I actually read the draft, I was like, okay, that's not really what you're doing here. You're not complaining about how hard it is to be a white man or how, like, unjust, unequal this is, but like, I think what stood out to me is that you're saying, okay, like there's no longer this space for a large group of people, a large part of the population to like actually, I don't want to say be represented because then again, it sounds like this kind of, I don't know, hollow kind of terminology, but like to tell their stories, to, have their experiences conveyed in literature. And I was like, that is a compelling argument because it's a real problem, like it's not merely about representation for its own sake.
Well,
And
I
I
mean, I
think that
think,
was
yeah.
lost
No,
in
I
the
think it
field.
also has the poisonous, this was more in the literary piece, but it has the poisonous effect of sanitizing art, sort of not, and not just for white men. But when all of it becomes like so sanitized, it stops being art. And like the idea that, you just go through these Iowa, workshop white dudes, and it's like they are just so bad. It's just like you can just tell how every creative writing workshop they ever went to, they just got hammered into this like, safe product, and it's just
Mm.
such garbage at the end. And that was the interesting reaction to that piece that I was like, it's like I spent like literally 90% of that piece criticizing white male writers. Like I didn't even like criticize a single other writer. I said, and it was like attacked for sort of uh, criticizing non-white male writers.
But that's the irony of a lot of the, I don't know, like these novels published by minorities, by BIPOC women, whatever. It's like they're published as long as they play the part. Like you
Yeah.
can't, if you're a black woman as a novelist, like you can't deviate from the script. I don't know, it's kind of like, I mean, what's the movie? What was the movie with the black guy who like made up the story? What was that called? The black novelist, and he like pretended he was Hood so he could get a book deal.
Oh,
American
oh, oh,
Fiction, is that what it
yeah.
was called?
That was the movie, which was not a good movie. But
No, but I mean, but that shows you it's like, okay, as long as you play that kind of,
Well, what was interesting about that movie is even the sort of meta of it was still true. Still the way to tell that story is to get like a black guy to tell that. Like
yeah. But that's why, and this kind of leads into the second article about DEI, because for me, the issue is not so much like, oh no, it's unfair to white men now, but it's like it's the deceptiveness of the way DEI is construed. That it's like we're told that this is correcting injustices, this is empowering marginalized communities, when really, I mean, it's kind of a truism at this point that it's like, okay, let's just take a couple of them and bring them into elite circles so then we can feel better about ourselves, pat ourselves on the back. When really, at the end of the day, like, what is it actually doing to empower like impoverished Black communities or whatever? And like as I was fact checking the second article, and there was a lot of stuff to check.
thank you
I
for doing that, by
it
the
was it was
way.
it was but no, I mean it was tedious but also fascinating because I just as the more I looked at all these websites you're linking to, I just was filled with this sense that, like, I don't know, there's something so dystopian about, I don't know, the way that they're presenting this on the websites. Like, look at all the minorities we hired. Look at the metrics, look at the statistics. I'm just like, I know there's this very hyper real kind of quality to all of it that I don't know. I think ultimately what was most disturbing about it is that like it shows you how far, I don't know, elite corporate power is to kind of shape reality according to its own narratives. Like they tell like they determine that this is what counts as diversity. This is what counts as progress. When in reality, it's not really changing much. But like everybody follows the party line, everybody goes along. So that's why for me, I was just like, whoa, this is really surreal that they're presenting this as if it's real. It's like on all these websites. Um, yeah, I don't know. It was,
I know. I mean, it is strange in retrospect to just sort of think about the like all of society push that they made and just how little back or the way that the backlash was always framed as sort of like isolated or wrong. There'd be like a sort of one Chris Rufo piece every 6 months, but people would always be like, that's just one place that's being crazy. And if you like look at it in a totality, it's like, no, like everyone just lost their minds um, for a while.
but I mean, you said this. I'm trying to find the quote in the article. You're like, okay, you mentioned, okay, the Trump administration getting rid of DEI. And then who is this person you quoted in the New Yorker? Undoubtedly, there has been ham-fisted DEI programming that is intrusive or even alienating, but for the most part is relatively benign practice meant to increase diversity, blah, 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 increase fairness. I don't know. I mean, like in the beginning, that was my reaction. Like, yeah, a lot of this DEI is too much, but ultimately it's good because it helps, create more fair hiring practices. But again, like I think as time went on, it became clear that it was about something very different. And again, like on the ground didn't actually benefit minorities in this way it said it would.
I think it also like the issue is partly that it became this sort of entire pipeline issue where it's like, okay, you can't, could this utopian drive to fix like all of society's problems by doing, this. But like what percentage of like, biology students who graduated college in 2010 were like non-white men? You know what I mean? And then you're going to say like, okay, but we need to have, 80% of them be, and it just ignores all, this entire, okay, you can maybe if you started tomorrow, you could be like, we're gonna, just track everyone, this would also be dystopian, but, we're gonna make sure that every school has like the exact percentages of people that we want for all these jobs, and we're just gonna track them through. And they're all gonna be competing with each other. Um, but they just decided suddenly that who cares what the pipe, what was the classics pipeline in 2006? They just
Yeah.
decided that the pipeline didn't matter. The fact that like in a lot of these fields, when I came to Hollywood, you can say what, like, I don't know, I would guess that like 60% of like aspirants were white men. Partly maybe I'm a little skewed on that because like that's mainly who I was hanging out with. But the idea that then you're going to take, 8% of them is crazy, It gets even more skewed when you think about what the actual pipelines like were for a lot of these things. And also, and again, to your point, like no one was ever like, we need to make like, diners across America have like an equal number of male servers. Like it's just it all sort of, concentrates in these fields.
Yeah, but it's also that, like, I guess the coding of the polemical coding of all matters DEI. Like if you question it at all, like you're categorically labeled as, right coded or MAGA coded. Like even if the reason why I question DEI is the fact that it doesn't actually do that much to benefit, lower income minority communities. Just off the bat, that's what you are. And if you care about Black people, if you care about women, you just have to support it. And it's like the fact that this is what public discourse has devolved into, it to me is kind of terrifying because like you can't ask questions and you can't actually ask like what concretely benefits people. Like it's, you just have to symbolically, to virtue signal, I am on the correct side, even if it does nothing to help with X group. Um,
I mean, I think you're understating a little. I think it benefited some people within that group. It didn't like,
sure.
but I think, and especially in the sort of gender wars, like it had some like weird effects, like not sort of in the less racialized space. Like I think that stuff also has, done some weird stuff to a lot of society. But no, I think you're right. Like it doesn't, this does not affect the vast majority of like working class Americans in any way, other than, sort of rhetorically, which I
Yeah.
think people take, personally. There was that, what I found the silly Matt Bruenig like counterpoint, where he took all of these professions and shoved them all together and was like, now you're a ticket, being a ticket taker also is in the same profession as being a screenwriter. But his point at the end was like, even if like these things did, they didn't even help anyone, but they alienated all these people from, the sort of left-wing coalition. So what was the point? But that was sort of his secondary point. His main point was just to attack me because like he's a party hack. Um, but no, there was like what did they win? What was won? Like it uh doesn't seem to compute long term.
Yeah, but then the other thing you mention in the article is how I guess like the older white males, like I guess mostly like the boomers and Gen Xers, who kind of left the millennial white guys hanging. I mean, say more about that. What you've noticed, just yeah,
Well,
in terms of
you
that
just have
regard.
all these people who sort of loudly proclaim like how interested they are in diversity hiring, be it in academia or in Hollywood.
Mm,
And there's a very simple way to make room for like a younger woman or person of color, and that is to sit to retire and say like I had my fill. But of course, no one ever does that. I spoke after the article, pretty prominent Gen X showrunner like reached out to me, and I think he had some mixed feelings. I think he clearly felt bad about the sort of regime of the last decade, but he said basically like I think you blamed us too much because
mm,
unless we were incredibly powerful, it was our jobs also. If I was like no, I'm hiring just whoever I think is best, and that's going to be 3 out of 5 of the staff writers jobs will go to white guys, like they would fire me. They would just not make the show. So unless you were really truly at the top, the pressures I think remained, although, I don't particularly feel bad for them because they still got, to work. Um,
mm,
but yeah, I think that the older white guys um, ended up, there's some elements, some people have sort of argued that part of it is they don't want to compete. It's like if you don't hire if the person you hire like doesn't think or isn't the best person for their job, then you're not really competing with them. You still get to be the like genius professor of the department. There's not like a star,
mm,
um, and I think there's something to that. I don't think that was sort of like the primary cause. Um,
mm.
but yeah, it's an interesting problem, and I don't know. I think what's going to happen is we're going to wake up in like 2040 and suddenly academia will be like 10% white men. Like it seems like it's like there's still, you look at the broader numbers and it's still like, skewed, but then, eventually there's a sort of retirement cliff and everything will change.
Assuming academia still
No, I
exists
don't
in
think,
2040.
I don't think, I mean, the rump state of academia.
Sure. So, I mean, let's go back to novels and fiction though, because I mean, so you mentioned that, yeah, like there are a lot of white males writing like autofiction type novels, and you're very critical of that. Why?
Look, I think autofiction has its place, but I think especially if you were going to write autofiction and not directly deal with the world as it exists around you, of um, like I think the best example of this. I don't know. Have you read the Topeka School?
No.
Ben Lerner. Anyway,
No.
it's pretty good. The first 300 pages are pretty good. And it takes place mainly in the 90s in Kansas, and it's talking about sort of growing up, becoming a man in various ways and sort of understanding whatever your own toxic impulses are. And it's pretty, you know, feels honest and true. And then suddenly in the coda, you find yourself in 2016, and Ben Lerner is like a good white man at a protest, being like, I need to let these other people speak. And it's just like what? Like like uh it ruined the whole novel for me. And I think that if you're gonna write, say like, you know what, there used to be a huge genre of like academic roman clefs where it's just like here's like a guy like, like take like Stoner or whatever, and I'm just gonna write my resentments at the whole English department and all the students. Um, and that ended because no one can be honest about what their resentments are for a decade. So if you're going to write autofiction and not to sort of engage with the culture around you feels fake. And, that's the death of any autofiction. It also, I think, for what it's worth, is a way of, I don't think autofiction is as like good as a genre as like, good real fiction.
Sure.
Um,
So, are there any novels by white males that you genuinely enjoyed in the last couple of years?
yeah, I really liked Matt Gazda's. I like The Sleepers a lot. I think
Okay.
that felt honest about the world. I liked Muscle Man. I didn't like love it. Um, it it felt a little sort of obvious maybe in the end, but I thought that, he tried.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of any. There was like another one that I read, but I'm trying to, that thing where like you can't remember the last like three books that you read. Um, yeah, I would say that probably my favorite piece of white male literature, which thankfully was published after my article, was The Sleepers.
Okay. What about non-white male literature?
I loved Rejection by Tony Tamute.
You did.
Um, I mean, it's a little. I then read Private Citizens, which made me like Rejection less,
Okay.
because it just felt like the same trick, but like dialed up, and it just made me think that he's like just really sort of nasty in a way. But I
Mhm.
still maintain that I thought Rejection was very good. Um, what else? I've been on like a nonfiction kick lately. I'm trying to remember the
No, no novels by women.
No, not well. There of course the Transit of Venus by Shirley Hazard. I think Sally Rooney. Like I read, I forget which Sally Rooney I read, and I liked it. It what it was like. Oh, I like the Long Island Compromise. I thought was good for the first half, and then kind of fell apart. Um, those were some novels by women. What other lady novels have I read recently? I have not read any of the sort of new buzzy ones. Um,
Trying to think. I mean, ironically, I mean, I don't know how much of this is like subconsciously intentional, but yeah, I mean, like pretty much all the novelists that I've interviewed here on the podcast are men, most of whom count as white, I guess.
who have you interviewed lately?
Okay, so we had Jordan
I can
Castro.
attack them each. Like, no.
Yeah, Jordan, we had Sean Thor Conroe, we had Ross Barkan, had Andre Asamoah, who's,
Oh yeah,
I mean,
he's
he's not really
old.
white. He's like Armenian, Egyptian, Jewish,
Yeah,
something, Turkish. Juno Diaz is not white.
no.
Um,
Has he written
Juno,
it? What happened? But he also like was part like he got
yes.
and then he just stopped writing stuff, I feel like.
So, I mean, I think I'm allowed to say this. So Juno got canceled for me too, which I thought it was ironic because they're like, oh yes, let's get Latinx man in literature. And then like, is it shocking that Latinx man is flirting, and I'm not defending, like, okay, I don't know what that went down with the particular person. Like, it may have been
It's
an
just a
anomaly.
kid. I
I'm just
mean,
like, why are we're trying to do this diversity thing. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, he got canceled. And like, I was in touch with him because I always loved his novels. Um, and I was like, yeah, he inspired me, and I'd love to have you come on the podcast. And he did. And like, he was really gracious, and like, it was great. But he's not white, so that doesn't count.
no, but he also stopped. I feel like he stopped right. Like I feel like that took it out of him. Do you know what I mean? Like it just like I don't. Maybe there's some genius manuscript in like a drawer that he's sitting on, but I just feel like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. And we had Andrew Barriga, who was not pleased with your article.
which I
Uh,
did not even insult him on.
no, I mean, yeah,
Like
I get what when he wrote a Substack post about it. Like, I get what he was saying. I enjoyed his novel. I thought it was fun.
I didn't read his novel. I didn't
It's
attack his
fun.
novel. I
I
didn't like
I think you'd
like
enjoy.
like he just was a complete dick about it. Like for no like
I get what he was saying. I mean,
he took like one clause and decided to like do a holier than thou post about um the permission structure of everything.
well, I say read the book anyway because it was fun. Who else is a male? The only female novelist that I think we had, I mean, we had Tara Isabella Burton, but we didn't talk about her novel. And then we had Book of Ein. What's Lexi Friedman.
I haven't read that book.
I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought she was hilarious. Um, but yeah, and then the other thing is like, so we put out this print zine once a year, and like, oh, there it is. If you haven't noticed, everyone except for one writer is a he, him. Um, which we had our launch party last week, and somebody was like, yeah, this was fun, but like maybe a little bit more female representation. And I was like, I'm good. I mean, I
Well,
think
I
not
think
all of them were white, by the way, but it was like all men reading. So,
the thing is like at this point, like the lane for like, women stuff is so like full. Like, I don't know I would have seen the point of someone who said that to you 15 years ago. You know what I mean? In like an honest way and been like, yeah, like I remember there was this kid in, my Princeton class who did his final project on abortion rights and didn't interview any women. It was like um, there's a point like where sure, like yes, obviously. But you also like it's all, I think also everything's split into sort of weird subcultures. So you gotta just roll with what interests you without the self-flagellation.
but then I'm also, and again, like this is where I get into trouble, but like I just feel like our whole kind of vibe with Cracks and Pomo is like, yeah, it's like male coded, not in the conventional way, but like I just think there's a reason why we attract more male writers because yeah, like the sensibility, or at least like the sense of humor is, I don't know, I feel like there are fewer women who like really get the vibe I'm going for. And the ones who do, obviously I publish them, like Bridget who's in there, like she's one of our best writers, but like it's mostly guys who kind of get what we're doing. So, I don't
The
know.
girls are all writing for Vogue. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean they get Vogue and the men get Cracks and Poma, which no one reads, so it's all good. Uh, no,
No one reads any of it. I'm a real New Yorker truther in terms of like there was a Joshua Cohen story that I loved. Like there's sort of, he's not technically a millennial, um, but it was sort of obliquely about the Gaza war. It was like from like a couple of years ago. And I looked it up, like to see if anyone on Twitter or Blue Sky like had discussed it. Here's like, Pulitzer Prize winning novelist writes a story about, not literally about, but basically that deals with Gaza, like at the height of Gaza fever. And literally no one posted anything about it on either of the platforms. And I'm just like, no one reads this magazine, like in an actual way.
Yeah, I mean, but that is the irony of all this. Like, nobody actually reads anymore. Art, like, nobody reads books. Who's reading books? Like, I don't think anyone cares. I don't know.
I like the Africa and Byzantium behind you. That seems cool.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't read that book. It just
No,
looks
but
nice.
yeah, no, it's
I went to the exhibit at the Met. It was good. Yeah, I mean, I read books if no one else does. I have an insane, I have a complex with like stealing books. When I see a book that I like can get away with stealing, I just have to do it. I don't know what's behind that.
from libraries mainly, or
I mean,
from,
if it's like an actual functioning library, I won't steal it because then they're gonna charge me. But like I used to teach at a school where like they had a huge book collection and they were starting to throw the books in the dump because nobody was reading. And I was like, I can't let this happen. Like something in me, I don't know, like I'm very opposed to throwing books in the garbage. So I was like, I'm just gonna play Robin Hood and steal all these books before they go in the garbage. And so now my house is overflowing with
no,
bookshelves.
I have so many. I used to go to all these like old library book sales, and every time I've moved, it's like the main problem is just the books. Like everything else, you can just kind of figure, And I did a big purge before our last move, but it's been built up again. Um, and there's just so
Yeah.
many books that like, I try. Sometimes you'll meet someone who like doesn't get it, and it's like you're like, no, it's not about like reading every book that you have. It's just
Yeah.
about like having them.
Yeah, but do you keep them like nice and organized or are they strewn all over the place?
Both. So I have like
Okay.
like big bookshelves in the living room, which are generally organized by genre, but not by like name. And then there's the books that I'm like sort of actively half reading, which is just like
Yeah.
monstrous piles in the bedroom.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like very safe when I'm surrounded by those monstrous piles of half-read books. I don't know, there's something again on a psychological level that's very consoling about
yeah.
that.
No, and you're like, and then then there's like you going on vacation. It's like what I need to take
Yeah.
like four books because like I might not like really want to finish one, two of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, that's literally me. And yeah, and like I'll never do e-readers
Oh
ever.
no, no, no. I tried once in like 2017 or something, and because like this like philosophy professor was like staying with me, and I was like, and he like loves his Kindle, and I was like, I tried it, and it's just like, no, it's just this is not this is what it feels like to like read a stupid article on my phone before I go to bed. It's just not what like reading is.
Yeah, no, I could never. But all right, so before we wrap things up, let's close with this. So in the first article, you close by saying, okay, I mean, all of this shitty situation could be an opportunity for something new. It could be something positive potentially. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I meant is that like, I think you could reasonably argue that this sort of like white male novel, as the post-war white male novel had been sort of done. And the point of view of that, sort of, not that like Philip Roth or John Updike or David are generic, but the sort of point of view of that had like run its course. So what would there be for like a millennial, for like a true genius millennial, white male writer to like write about, like just in that tradition? Like I don't know. The truth is I don't know what. And I think that the last decade, you know, you could realistically say like provided enough grist and enough friction for someone to sort of make something beautiful and interesting out of that if they were being brilliant and honest. And I haven't seen it yet, but like, I think it might yet be there. So that's the hope.
Well, let's see what happens. You never know.
All right.
All right. So obviously people should read those two articles if they haven't. Anything else we want to plug?
No, I'm just out here uh taking care of my kids, I am trying to work on I have an idea for an article about toddler literature.
Oh,
Which is we all the books that have been published since like 2010, sort of picture story books, are almost.
about woke trans
No,
black
no,
men.
it's not that's part of it. That stuff is like anti-racist baby is ridiculous and silly. But the main issue is that they are all meant to flatter the sensibility of the millennial who's buying them. Like, so the worst book the book that I hate the most in the world is this book called Dragons Love Tacos, where it's just this fucking jabroni narrator being like, "Hey kid, you know what dragons love? They love tacos. You know what they don't love? Don't give them spicy tacos." And it's just in that voice for, whatever number of pages. And it could
Right.
be like a sort of like once upon a time there was a dragon who loved tacos. But the larger point that I'm going to get at, I think, when I finally sit down and write the piece and take out like 40 children's books like a pedophile from the public library, um, is is that like they all none of them like ask the child to like imagine themselves like either in a wondrous or moral situation. Um,
Okay. That's really interesting.
and there's just no the point of all these books, like I don't know if you read Frog and Toad when you were a kid, but it's like very simple. Like, my kids love it, and it's like there's no pizzazz there. It's just like two guys, like, one's kind of simple, one, and there's like a little lesson, and it like asks for empathy from like the child reader.
Hmm.
Um, and the books the millennials like buy for their kids are like, part of it is like woke garbage, but the main like thing that I think is wrong is that like it's like, you're going to buy your 3-year-old a biography of Jean-Michel Basquiat. That's not for him. That's for you to put on your bookshelf and tell your friends that you're cool. Like that,
Yeah. But what you're saying about like the imagination and like
that yeah. So
because
I think
I hear people like I hear some people like have that kind of critique about the kids' TV shows now. And like I mean I wouldn't know because I do not watch children's TV shows now. But like it's a critique I probably wouldn't have picked up on even if I did. So it's 'cause, like a lot of people say that about Coco Melon that it's like destroying children's brains and I'm just
Oh
like
yeah. No, we
yeah, I
don't
mean
we don't let our kids watch that stuff. But I'll tell
yeah,
you, one time we had a kid Spotify. There, the algo is always pushing you towards that. We were
yeah,
listening to I think Rafi in the car,
yeah. I
and
remember him.
you end up we finished the Rafi playlist, and like suddenly there's some other song in like, like sometimes in your car you're listening to bad radio and it takes you like 5 minutes to sort of process that you've been listening to this song that you hate.
Yeah.
So our we suddenly there's Coco Melon comes on, and like our son in the back is just like enthralled, and I'm
Yeah.
like whatever they cracked is insane but also terrible.
I
And
mean, since I brought him up before, I mean, like, do you have a hot take on like the narrative structure of SpongeBob?
no, I've never like I was like I like I like watched SpongeBob a little, but
A
I feel
little.
like I
Oh.
feel like I'm not like ahead, and I don't quite remember it enough
Yeah,
to.
because I mean, it was SpongeBob and Harry Potter that like completely shaped my just my orientation to reality as a
You're a
child.
true zillennial.
Yeah, I mean, because like I really do, because no, like SpongeBob, like I said, like my parents would try to make me do real things like go to baseball camp or go to art camp, be in the school play. And I was like, no, I need to watch SpongeBob. Like I have
What was
free time so I can enjoy myself, not so I can be bored doing dumb shit. So like I literally think in SpongeBob quotes. Like something will happen and I'll just think like of a line from SpongeBob. And I think, yeah, it's like definitely fucked up my psyche, but I think it's also made me more weird and thereby more creative, but it's definitely. screwed me over.
I think that they've homogenized all of those like kid shows in a way that is like both safe and like, you know, I think, there's no show that you watch like, with your kids. Although at this point, we just have them watch old Disney movies. But like, there was a period where we were like kind of experimenting with like TV shows, and they're all like safe. Like none of them are weird. Like there's no, and they're all also obvious. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's like sort of the general cultural problem.
And like no sexual innuendos like in SpongeBob.
No, no, no.
Because
Well,
it's insane how many they slipped in there.
I
It's
mean,
like a lot.
we did just take our 4-year-old to the Sound of Music, and now he's in love with Liesel.
Wow. Yeah, well, I mean, what about Harry Potter though?
Harry Potter. So I feel like I was just old enough to miss Harry. So I am old. I'm 40. But my brother, who's 38, was like upset. I remember we were on vacation. He was obsessed. He would like line up at the bookstore with like all
Yeah.
um but I was like old enough and thought I was like too cool that I never read them. I
Oh
think
wow.
I must have been like 13 or 14 when it came out. Uh,
Okay.
and I remember once being on vacation, I had run out of my own books, and then I like read like one of the Harry Potters, but it never hit me the way that it would have hit like a 10-year-old. Um, and I've managed to like go my whole life, maybe to my detriment, although she's canceled
Mm,
too, so whatever.
wow. Yeah, I mean, but I think Harry Potter is a little bit proto woke in the sense that it's like very preachy and that the moral messages are very simplistic.
For me, the children's series that I loved the most, that I reread like 7 times, was the Chronicles of Narnia. And
Yeah,
I
that's
remember,
yeah.
I remember, I grew up fairly Jewish, but I remember like towards the I reread, um, I forget which one, but it suddenly dawned up during Jewish prayers. I would like wish that I could go to Narnia. That was like my
Yeah.
like, um, and at one point, like I'm rereading it, and they're like, "Oh, but Aslan, we will never see you again." And he's like, "No, no, children. On Earth, you know me as the sun." And I'm like, I think I was like finally old enough to be like, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
Um, smuggled in that. Didn't really smuggle it in the Christian parable, but
Yeah, I just feel like to C.S. Lewis's credit, the allegory was much more subtle than J.K. Rowling's like moral preaching. 'Cause it's like it's super straightforward. Gryffindor are the good people, Slytherin is bad, because Gryffindor is the tolerant, nice people who accepts the minorities, and Slytherin's, quasi-fascist. So we have to condemn them. And it's like, okay, well, where's the room for my imagination? Whereas I think C.S. Lewis, like, yes, it's a Christian allegory, but you got to do some work before you get
yeah,
there,
you
I
have to
guess.
reread them 8 times as a 8-year-old before you find it finally settled in. Well, his other series was like really creepy. You ever read Paralandria?
No, I never did. I have mixed feelings about him. Find him a little annoying.
I remember I was trying when I was trying to be like an intellectual, I would like read The Problem of Pain. And I was like,
Yeah, I mean, those like the theological ones they're like helpful, but I think like a lot of people who are like trying to get into Christianity, like yeah, they're nice little primers, but I'm annoyed by how British he is, I guess. Like he's
yeah.
just painfully British and it's like, all right, enough. Yeah. But yeah, I mean the irony of J.K. Rowling and her like anti-fascist kind of virtue signaling is that she turns out to be, kind of fascist herself. She's a TERF, so little did we expect.
Well, she would argue that she's the ultimate anti-fascist.
Well, depends who you ask, but anyway, all right. So check out Jacob's work. Perhaps he'll have more coming soon, we hope. But yeah, thanks for coming on, Jake.
Thanks again.